I've been hard at work transforming this old woodworking shed into my new home brewery, and I desperately need your help. While I wait for some parts to arrive in the mail, I thought I'd take this opportunity to number 1, answer some of the most common questions I've been receiving, number 2, bring you up to speed on where I'm at with the project, and number 3, ask you for some much needed help figuring out the best way to move forward. Now, I've been getting a lot of questions about the brewery build, but one of the most common questions is how are you controlling the steam? And the answer is, I'm using a steam condenser during the boil. There's a little bit of steam during the mash when I go above maybe 150 degrees Fahrenheit or so, but it hasn't been a problem so far, and I live in a very dry climate. If it does become an issue, I'll add some type of exhaust fan to the window behind the kettle. I thought this was another good question, and the answer is maybe I should be, but that's not something that I worry about. It's bound to happen at some point, but cross-contamination isn't quite as spontaneous as you might think. It's usually the result of a mistake like using a dirty tool, and I can live with that. If I screw up and contaminate a beer, that's on me. And not to scare you, but there's wild yeast and bacteria in your brewery too, whether you make wild beers or not. Another good question was about the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi is collecting fermentation data from my tilt hydrometers and sending those data to BrewFather for storage and visualization. So it's helping me track fermentation. And by far, the most common question I've been getting is, dude, where's the water? This is what I need your help with. But first, let me bring you up to speed on where I'm at with the project. After I brewed the first batch of beer in here, I ended up doing a bit of rearranging, and I mounted my new fermenter on the wall between my kettle and the rest of my fermenters. This change makes it feel a little more open in here, and after brewing some Saison to fill the new fermenter, I think it works pretty well with my workflow. And as a bonus, it looks pretty cool too. And to take that look to the next level, I mounted a mini uni 20-liter tank on the other side of the brew kettle. We'll talk about this in more detail later, but I'm planning to use this tank as my sparge water tank. I also took some time to play around with a couple locations for my counterflow chiller. It was originally flat on the bench, and then I tried it mounted vertically on the wall, and while it looks pretty cool like this, it didn't work out for me because it just traps way too much liquid in the chiller. And even if you blow it out with oxygen or CO2, there's always something left in there. So most recently, I moved it to the very top of the rack. This way, it still drains completely, but it's not taking up valuable bench space. I think this is going to be the best option for me, but I still need to test it out. I also took a few minutes to mount the BREWTOOLS controller. I love that you can relocate this screen to a more ergonomic position, and I love even more that the screen bracket uses the VESA standard, so we have plenty of options for mounts. This one is my old monitor stand that simply clamps to the benchtop. And the last thing I'll show you is I went ahead and zip tied some tool organizers to the rack that I can use to hang things like hoses, mash paddles, and other things like that. Now, as we step back, this is what the brewing space currently looks like, and I need you to keep this image in mind because this is what I need your help with. I'm working on a plan for my water situation, and I need to solve for brewing water, cleaning water, condenser water, and chiller water. And I want to do this without involving plumbers, permits, or anything like that. So here's where I'm at. With all of my equipment in what I hope are the final positions, I'm planning to run a water line in from the right side, go up through the floor of the shed following the vertical post of the rack, and then left all the way to the chiller. This would be blue 1/2-inch PEX pipe with a garden hose faucet on the outside of the shed. The idea is I can run a garden hose from the house and connect it to the outside of the shed to supply all my water needs on the inside of the shed. For this part, I'm hoping for some general feedback on the layout, so let me know if you see any issues here. Now, let's walk through the connection points to this PEX line. The first stop after coming in the building is my RO water system, which I'm setting up on the bottom shelf of the rack right under the Mini Uni 20. I'll tee off the 1/2-inch PEX to 1/4-inch PEX, run through the 5-stage filter, and then instead of using a regular RO tank, I'm planning to run straight to the Mini Uni 20 with the pressure lid. So I'll come out of the filter with 1/4-inch PEX, step up to 5/16 AVA barrier, run through a Kegland filometer, which will act as the valve and the meter, and then into the pressurized Mini Uni. My question here is, how hard do we think it'll be to keep this tank pressurized? It's not the biggest deal because I can actually use some gravity here to feed to the pump on the B40, but I think it could help ensure there's a steady flow of water. Let me know what you think. Either way, it'll be heated in the tank using the 230 volt BREWTOOLS heater controlled by something like this BREWBUILT controller. Originally, I was also thinking about using this tank to heat cleaning water, but I think I'm going to skip that for simplicity and instead pull cleaning water directly from the water line, which is our next junction. This is just a straightforward tee off the PEX line to a ball valve, garden hose, and washdown nozzle. The only hard part here is making sure I don't have any leaks in the garden hose, but I think this should be fine. Next stop is the feed to my steam condenser, which will use the exact same garden hose configuration, and then again the same configuration for the counterflow chiller. Now this left side is fairly straightforward on the inlet side of things, but where it gets a little tricky is this is where most of my outlets are. The chiller, condenser, and the B40 itself will all drain via hoses to a PVC drain system mounted to the front of the rack, and this is honestly where I'm having the hardest time. The easiest way for me to think about this is like under the kitchen sink. So I'll have some kind of drain to tuck these hoses into that feeds into 1.5 or 2-inch PVC pipe run at a slight decline to the right side. That's where the wastewater from the RO system will connect. Then I'll run straight through the floor to a P-trap and then out the side of the building. And luckily, the ground outside runs downhill to a deer plot that we plant. At some point, I might consider some kind of collection system, but for now, my main concern is just getting that wastewater outside. So first question, does this wastewater piping make sense? Second, do I actually need to include a P-trap at the bottom of the run? And third, do I need to think about venting? So that's the whole system. And one more thing to note is I'm thinking the kettle can double as my sink basin for washing up. I can spray things off with the hose and that wastewater will either collect in the kettle or I can drain it straight outside. I can also soak things in PBW or sanitizer when needed and collect that into a bucket instead of running it out to the garden. Overall, I think it's a fairly versatile plan, but I'm definitely not skilled in plumbing, so I really appreciate any help or direction you guys can provide. Let me know in the comments what you think of the plan. As long as everything arrives in the mail on time, next week I should be able to take the next step forward, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the next one. My name's Dan, this is Hops and Gnarly. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll see you again soon.